The renewing of your mind thing is, I think our hearts and our minds are soil. I need to plant just the things of God in this season for what I need in the next season.
What's up, party people? This is the Nook Podcast. My name is Steven, and we are in week 6 of Renew the Mind, a series of episodes based on Romans 12:2 that says, "Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." The definition of the word renew is awesome. To renew is to resume an activity after an interruption. As Christ followers, our main priority is to seek Jesus all day, every day. How many of us would be honest enough to say that our priority is interrupted with great regularity? The more that my relationship with Jesus is interrupted, the more that I tend to act out of my own set of rules. And that's when I get really off track. Since we're looking at definitions, check out what transform means. I love this. To transform means to make a thorough or dramatic change in the form, appearance, or character of. Renewing our minds in Christ means that we must be transformed to look and sound more like Him. In the Gospel of John, chapter 4, Jesus said, "A time is coming, and even now has arrived, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people the Father seeks to be His worshipers. God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and truth." Our personal view of worship says a lot about us. It's so much more than just singing songs in church. I did a series of episodes about the importance of worship to start 2023. If that's something that you're interested in, go back and check out those shows. I had some fantastic guests who talked about things from several different angles. My guest today is Chase Wagner. He's a worship pastor from Grace City Church in Lakeland, Florida. In this discussion, you will hear his passion for God and for people, and perhaps most importantly, his desire to be authentic in leading people to that transformed place of worshiping God in spirit and in truth. As is often the case with great musicians, his love of music started very early in his life.
I just always grew up. I mean, my dad, giving me a guitar, teaching me 3 chords, and taking me to see, even non-Christian bands, growing up, taking me to see when I was like, to go see U2, taking me to see the Marley Brothers, taking me to go see the Killers after their first record, Hot Fuss, came out.
Yep.
It took me to see like great music. I'm from Seattle originally, and so I got into playing power chords and punk rock stuff like in my garage, and in high school was just definitely into like, the battle of the bands worlds and playing locally and that sort of thing. And all the teenage angsty stuff was so big then. And I had a great youth pastor. I had a youth pastor that had moved to town around that time named Chad Veach, who pastors now in LA.
Oh, yes.
He was our youth pastor. He was our pastor for 10 years.
Oh,
and
that's
so he taught
cool.
me to read my Bible. Yeah, he taught me how to read my Bible when I was 14. And kind of around that time was like, hey, Chase, what if you didn't do music stuff just for fun, but you could do it in the church? And that opened my mind up to all kinds of what's creativity in the church, and what could film be in the church, and what could music be in the church. And I just fell in love with all of that. And so that was maybe 2000, and to date myself, probably 2007. And so it's cool now to kind of went on that journey. We started making live records at our church with Chad, and I kind of learned a lot in high school of how to do that. So to the point where when I graduated college, one of our other pastors, Andrew Gard, who's our lead pastor now, he was our college pastor in Puyallup, Washington, Seattle area, was like, hey, I'm randomly getting this job at this school called Southeastern University in Lakeland, Florida. They want to do annual live records and kind of start a worship ministry there. Is that something that you'd want to come and do? And I knew how to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
that's
so,
awesome.
that was 2012. Moved to Florida 10 years ago, and we started SEU Worship, which is kind of the band on campus. And we did that for 5 years and learned a ton and had a blast and worked with so many amazing students that are doing so many amazing things now. People like Tiffany Hudson, people like Johnny Pena, people that we got to watch them as students, and God now used them in amazing ways. And then kind of halfway to that, we were like, what if we didn't just do this for 18 to 24-year-olds, but we did it for, the 14-year-old kid that I was, or, the 55-year-old man who's, time's not up yet. You know what I mean? And so we started Grace City Church now seven years ago. And we did both for a season of ministry on the campus and the school. It just got out of control as far as, because the church was working, and we went to 5 services. Church went bonanzas. That's not even necessarily like a good thing. Like, it's great people are getting reached and all that, but 5 services on a Sunday, I don't know if it's great for your voice or your team or your mental. And so, but God used it. And so we're about 7 years in the church. And so, yeah, I'm full-time, Grace City. And I just signed yesterday at Capitol Records as a staff writer. I've been staff writer.
Congrats on that.
Thanks, man. Been staff writing for the last 4 years at Integrity. We had an amazing time there, just writing for all kinds of artists like Leeland and Jesus Culture and Craft, and people that are just making such a great impact. And then and kind of felt like my time was coming to an end there, just to try new things and meet new people. And so we just signed the deal at Capitol yesterday. So I'm excited about that and joining the team there. And so that's kind of my life, is family. I got two beautiful daughters and a wife, and so it's family, and it's music and church and writing and film. I love all that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. Well, you've got this advantage right now then of being able to look back at your 14-year-old self. What would you tell that guy? I mean, were you all in when Chad Veach gave you that recommendation, or was there some angst in that? I'm just curious, looking back, since 14 was such a pivotal age for you, what would you say to that guy knowing what you know now?
Man, that's a great question. And something I feel like would maybe be that, hey, your consistency is more important than your intensity.
That's good.
Just like in ministry or in life, or of just wanting them to change the world. You know what I mean? And I'm getting that, and you have that as a young person so much. But I've seen that now at 33, like I've seen so many people, things fall on the wayside maybe for the sake of that. Going, man, I just keep showing up, keep being positive. And I think there was times in my life where I was too focused on the intensity of, we got to reach the world. We need more followers. We need more streams. We need more people at the creative night. Whatever it is that you're building, of someone for that's listening, of just going, man, I've realized that, like, at this point in my life, man, my consistency and just showing up and just keeping my wife and my friends and my staff happy. You know what I mean? And just that, and being a consistent person is actually like terrifyingly more fruitful than being than being an intense person. You know what I mean? An intensity.
Right. Well, in fact, I would say that that's almost countercultural as far as the worship world, in that that's such an interesting facet for me now as a longtime church guy. And I've been working full time in ministry since 2007. No, actually 2005. And I'm a recovering church video director. I've been behind those curtains and those many services and all that kind of stuff. And so it's a very interesting thing to me in the now, in that worship is an industry. And that's kind of where I guess we could switch to the kitchen part of just, how do you balance those tensions? How do you balance those time commitments when there's got to be a lot of pressure on you to perform and draw God's people into that holy place, but it's also your job. and it requires of a lot of you there, and you've still got that family to take care of at the same time. And I just know that's a lot to juggle.
Yeah, totally. And I can relate to you, Stephen, as far as when we started the church 7 years ago. I was the second hire at the church, right? So you're the creative pastor. So that's video, photo, website, social media, worship on Sundays, service order. And that's a lot. And I think most churches kind of operate, right? I think probably maybe the majority of your listeners, they're not necessarily blessed to have a huge staff. And I've really I've been through my own battles with anxiety, and I think of taking care of myself. Like it sounds weird in a Christian world, right? But putting your health first.
Yes.
Above everything else. Like God, like I'm going to love God. I heard somebody say recently, and I don't know if I agree with it in general, but it's a fascinating thing to think about, of taking care of, prioritizing your health even before God. Because how are you supposed to love God, interact with God, walk walk the walk and do the things you want to do in loving God if you can't take care of your health? That your health has to actually be, I don't know if I even agree with that, but I'm like, what a fascinating thing though to go, that is the lesson I think that I've learned is like, man, my health has to come before everything. Yeah. Because if I can't be the worship, I can't be good on staff to my senior pastor. I can't be the available, fun father that I want to be to my kids. Like all of that, my health has to be paramount. And I think so many times over the last 10 years and even the culture of the church of the last 15 years of just being like, man, pour myself out like a drink offering before the Lord. Like Paul said, like we want to all do that. But if I'm not good, it's not going to work. Yes. And we've had so many, and I'm sure you do too, like people that aren't in ministry anymore end up making a bad decision or X, Y, Z. And it's because of those things. And I think, man, if I wish that Chase thought more about consistency and health over the last 10 years rather than change the world. Because I'm changing the world, and I'm gonna do that for the next. I want to do that for the next few decades still. But I'm realizing, man, I could have done it a lot healthier. I could have been more available. I could have not hurt myself maybe in certain ways of just putting my own health first, having hobbies that aren't just, because when you're a true believer, when you're a true, like you're bought into it, you're bought into, you pray, you talk to God, you want to see revival. You really believe that, of also having things like golf. Right. Having some things that just show not the change the world thing. Yes. For your soul to breathe, you know what I mean? And for you to get perspective on yourself. That's probably what I would be telling my 14-year-old self, honestly. Yeah. And that's good. Well, and that's a great segue into this series that I am doing right now, how critical it is that we renew our minds. And what I have landed on in so many of these conversations is that a scripture like that kind of gets worn out. We've all heard it to the point where I feel like we can be numb to it and lose the priority of it. But that's exactly what you're addressing right now, that without times of renewing your mind, that's when the busyness takes over and you lose that, okay, wait a minute, I do need to take care of myself. And I don't view that as a selfish thing at all. That should absolutely be prioritized, because like what you were just saying, I know I could pull up the phone numbers of people right now that I know just got burned out, chewed up, spit out, all those things, and not only ran away from church work, but in a handful of situations ran away from their faith. And that just, that hurts. Yeah. And I'm glad to hear you saying that this is a big deal for you. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if there's younger people listening, and like even our younger staff at the church, we got like a lot of young people in their early 20s now on our staff. And it's like going, man, your consistency more than your intensity. Like your youth group's going to be fine. Like the creative culture team's going to be fine. Like it's going to be great, but like, are you going to be fine? Like you can still be here doing this in 10 years. Like that's what I want for our younger staff. You know what I mean? Sure.
Well, and I'm going to go ahead and guess that the more that you prioritize a healthy you, that has to spill off on to your family, that to your staff, to the people that are in the seats on any given weekend, because you're working from a much healthier place than an empty tank.
Right. And God's good. Like God's got it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
yes.
Like we all like, I mean, I want to evangelize like I'm like an Arminian and I'm asleep like I'm a Calvinist, right? Like I hear people like say that, like, but God is good. Like God's got it. Like he just loves you. He just wants you to be a part. He just wants you on the journey. Like, but he doesn't need you.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't need you on the, like he's like, God's going to build his church and the gates of hell will prevail. Right. So it's like, he's good. And so if you want to be on that journey with him, you got to take care of yourself. And I've been learning that in a big way.
Right. Well, if I could bounce back to this monster machine that the worship industry has become, are there ever times where you feel like there's a pace to it? I mean, it just amazes me. I used to work with Brandon Lake at Seacoast, and to see where he is now and what he's doing is, there's a proudness in that for me, because I remember when he was a scared kid and his eyes were just locked on the confidence monitor.
Right.
And that's not who he is now. And I just wonder if you ever feel a pressure to try to keep up with. It's like, my goodness, the worship world is kicking stuff out all the time.
Man.
Can we ever just settle for just a little bit? It's like, we haven't learned the last 10 songs, but you're already on to the next.
Right. Totally. Man, I think the things that make the impact in the worship world right now are just the authentic, right? And I think we've seen more than a huge stage with a huge crowd, with a huge light show. Everyone wants the authentic right now, including myself. They're like, we're not as wowed as we were 10 years ago by that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think of course there's a pressure, but I think at my stage of life, maybe, and it's what I maybe say, and I'm not that old, I'm 33, but to the 18-year-old that's maybe listening, or to the 20s, it's like, man, just be yourself to the max.
That's good.
Turning it up. You know what I mean? Because I know Brandon as well. Like we talked about, Brandon is doing incredible work. I'm a Brandon fan. But going from that kid that had his eyes glued on the monitor to who he is now, and even me knowing him in the last 10 years, he's just turned up who he is. He's not somebody else. He's turned Brandon up to 11.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I love, our pastors always said to me, like, man, Chase, we don't need you to be somebody you're not. We just need more of you. We just need you to turn up who you are to the maximum. And I think that's, it's like, even how I'm talking right now, I'm not talking to my wife like this at the dinner table. Right. But I'm on a podcast with Steven today, and I want to make an impact. So I'm turning up how I interact in a social level. Sure. To be who I am to the maximum. And so I think that's, man, nobody wants clones. Nobody wants a Mav City Light. Nobody wants a United Light. Everybody's looking for the new, who's just themselves, and they're comfy in their own skin. Easier said than done, though.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? That we all are standing on the backs of other great worship leaders and people that have done amazing things in ministry. So it's hard not to pick that stuff up.
Yeah.
And to wear some of that, but to go to my best of my ability. How can I just be who God's called me to be? Sound how God's called me to sound. Yeah. Have my voice sound like my voice, and not be ashamed of it, and try to make it sound like somebody else's. I think that's the kind of stuff that I really want younger leaders to really think about, and including, and preaching to the choir of myself, of just going, man, I think what's working in the machine and what stands out from the noise is the individual and their unique, imago Dei, their unique touch of God on their life. That's what I want to, that's the music I want to put in my pods and go, man, that's what I want. Leeland, who I'm a huge, just one amazing person. Him and Casey are just amazing. But like their new record is just them to the max.
Yeah.
And it is not a circle with a big gospel choir around it. It is not a rock band with, in an arena playing U2 type riffs. It is not that. It's them to the, I don't listen to it at all, but it's them to the maximum. And it's so original and so refreshing. And to me, that's my sermon prep, or actually, spending time with God. That's probably the Christian record to me over the last year, and the thing that's in my ears, and it's going like, because it's authentic, it's them to the max.
Well, and honestly, I feel like, it's one thing to be a believer and enjoy the music at church, but I think that as you mature, you also gain that, it's a discernment to me. And I feel like you can sense it from the first measure. It's like, oh man, this is going to take me somewhere. And it's not an emotional response. There's a depth to it that, I love to sing, but there's also times that I love to just find myself silent because I just want that presence of God that amazing music helps usher in. Is it ever an issue for you when, you spoke about the 5 services. That's not a short order on any given Sunday. Do you feel like you can be that total self through all of those 5 services? Or is that where you're just leaning on God and your team like crazy?
Yeah. Man, I think there's ways you can keep it fresh. I remember right now we're doing 3 services because we got a bigger box.
Oh, okay.
We had a box. We had a beautiful church. It was downtown Lakeland that sat 300 people. It was an old Presbyterian church, over 100 years old, beautiful stained glass. And that's what started the church. And then we were doing 5, and it's like, this is kind of everyone's nightmare. And so we were like, it's a building now that fits about 800 people.
Oh, nice.
And we do 3 now, 4 in the summer, 4 during like the main season. But I think that there's different things you can do. Like one is like, man, this service, I'm going to pray for this person. Okay. So I'm walking the set. It's set number 3 at 12:30. It's like a 12:30 service time or something. Been there since 6:30 at rehearsal. And you're just going to, right now, I'm going to pray for this person that I know is not walking with the Lord in my family. Or when you spend 3 to 5 services with a team backstage, you're all finding out each other's life and who has cancer and who, who's in treatment and who's not doing well and who financially needs God to provide. It's like all that stuff is happening backstage anyway, and going, hey, this next service, I'm going to pray for you the whole time. And even like little tricks like that help, I think, keep it fresh. But then I think also just turning yourself up to the maximum and just going, I'm going to be myself. I'm going to worship. I'm going to give it everything I have. And Monday morning, I'm going to feel a certain type of way.
Right.
But here today, I'm going to lay it all out. And I've never, at Grace City at least, I've never walked away from a Sunday being like, man, that was, I walked away being like, that was long, but I've always walked away going, that was good. Like that was a good, I'll walk away from meetings on a Monday being like, man, church work is hard. like on a Wednesday morning, like, man, church work is hard.
Yes.
But I've never walked away from a Sunday being like, I always walk away going, that was good. Like that was, God showed up. And that's just my experience.
Yeah. Well, and you're making me think too, and this is almost a hard question to ask because I feel like as someone who has always been behind the scenes in worship environments, worship services, that it's hard for me to truly gauge what does the average churchgoer, what does that guy, what does that lady think about what an average week looks like for Chase? He's a worship leader. He probably just sits around playing guitar all week, right? And reading his Bible, but you're still just a dude with a wife and kids and bills to pay and errands to run. Is there anything about that you feel like is misunderstood from the people who you will stand in front of this coming weekend?
I think all church cultures are different, right? I think for us, we have a huge volunteer culture, and we've been blessed to lead that to where my like worship leader, who's also on staff with me, like he works full time for Subsplash. Okay, so that's like full time. He works in church, like he works for a church app. Then there's like Jasmine French, or now Penny just got married, who's my coordinator. She's a full time school teacher, and that's what. So I think I'm the blessed to be the only full time person besides our because we're technically a church plant. We see ourselves as a church plant, we have a full time production person, but I think besides that, I think our church can think like, yeah, like all these guys, like this is their job, and they don't necessarily know how incredible it is. It's like, actually, no, Jasmine's going to be at school with a bunch of crazy junior hires tomorrow at 7 a.m. Like, so the sacrifice of some of our staff is what I'm impressed with. The sacrifice of some of our volunteers of, that like when you have 2 days and I talked about a little bit earlier in this podcast. So I worked 2 jobs. I was at the university, and then we planted the church, right? So you do church on Sunday and then your day off Saturday. And so I got to experience that for years. And that's the majority of our volunteers that they work, in the week, and then they have 1 day off Saturday, and they come and they do 3-4 services with us on Sunday. It's incredible. Yeah. And that's the stuff that I don't want to take for granted. And that's, I think, I wish more people like sitting in our church even knew that, exactly what you're saying. Yeah. Like they come and they go, oh, so like they get to be a church rock band all week. It's like, no, like all these guys are sacrificing and has husbands and wives and kids, and this is their offering to God right now. Yeah. And then that blows my mind. That's cool.
Well, I'm curious what your kids see in you, that dad's up there in front a lot, that, what are they seeing modeled for them, not only just as your daughters, but as future folks in the church, members of society.
Yeah. Like kids can fill out like these little things at school. It's like, I love my dad because he plays with me. My dad's favorite color is blank. My dad's favorite, and it's fun to see them at young ages. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Oh, nice.
Like what, right? You know what I mean? Or like, what they perceive.
Yes.
For what dad's job is singing at church.
Right.
They'll write. It's like, well, yeah, I sing at church, right? But it's more so, gathering these 40 volunteers every Sunday and figuring out and attending to their needs and hospitality. And this is like maybe a side note, but we're working on a new building now because we're doing too many services here. So like, okay, we're working on this new building, and the builder was like, how would you describe Grace City Music in 2 words? Like what in the space that you need in this new building, what are like 2 words that you would say to describe what Grace City wants to accomplish in the new room? And I was like, 2 things: creativity, hospitality. Like I was going to say what Grace City Music is. What does Dad do? It's creativity for sure. Creative ministry, 50%. But the other 50% of how I see my job is hospitality.
That's good.
Caring to meet people, right? If you're in the church, worship artist thing's a different deal. Worship artist stuff is fun, and like recording studio and music videos and go do that. And that's a part of my life too. It's fun. But my job and like what I feel like I get paid to do is the hospitality part of caring for people's needs. Mm-hmm. And that when they show up on Sunday, that there's toilet paper on the thing, and maybe there's snacks and there's enough paper towels and soap. And when there's not, that's the stuff that gets some fire burning under me of going like, no, like this is like, we got to take care of these people. These are the people that God's given us. And this is what makes Grace City Music great. Are these people that take their Sunday, you know what I mean? Whatever. I'm on a tangent now. But that's what I see myself. My kids, what do they think Dad does? I think he sings at church, and that's fine. But really, I think the majority of my work is caring for people and keeping our volunteers happy and our staff happy and making them feel like church is a good thing, right? There's a lot of documentaries out now that would say church isn't a good thing, and that church isn't, and a lot of content that would say, man, Jesus is cool, but like organized church is not.
Yes.
And so how do I convey as a person, a younger person in culture, as a millennial, whatever. How do I convey that church is good and that it's something worth our time, a church worth building,
Right.
So that's kind of the stuff on my mind when it comes to that.
I got you. One thing I knew I wanted to touch on with you, and because we're where we are in the conversation right now, how would you advise, or what comes to mind for you at least, when you just want to encourage people that they can renew their minds by engaging in worship, that it's not just that 20 minutes before pastor comes up and preaches, that there's intent behind worship. And whether it's in church, whether it's on your car driving to work on a Tuesday morning, how can we best be intentional about how we, the churchgoers, how we approach worship?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is when Paul's talking about praying without ceasing. That's like the first thing that comes to mind of going, if you've never practiced that, try to practice that as a believer, of just going, man, yeah, my worship is not that 20, like you said, that 20 minutes. It's prayer without ceasing in my day, and in the morning when I wake up, when I'm in the bed, and just talking to God about the things I like, the things I didn't like, the things that the people I need Him to be with. That's an ongoing conversation that is as a part of my faith and has been for some years. And so if someone's listening and you haven't practiced that, begin to practice that in, like you said, your car, and that praying without ceasing throughout the day. The renewing of your mind thing is, I think our hearts and our minds are soil, and good soil. And so it's up to us of what we're putting in that thing. And that might sound like a really elementary and like a preschool lesson.
Yes.
But I've learned it in my life of like, there's times of my life where I've had to go, I'm only watching comedies.
Yeah.
Because I'm only going to watch really dumb comedies right now, because life is heavy. Yeah. Church is heavy. Things are the conversations that are happening. My anxiety is up. And so I can't put in my mind maybe things that aren't bad, that maybe the Bible wouldn't condemn, you know what I mean? But certain things in media, when it comes to music, and it's like, I love rap music. I love alien documentaries about aliens. I love it. It's fun. I don't think the Bible's against necessarily either of those things.
No.
But there's seasons of my life where I got to cut out both those things. because I need to make sure the renewing of my mind, what I'm sowing, what I need for the next, in this season, for what I need in the next season, I need to plant good things right now. I need to plant just the things of God, just the Christian stuff, just the plant good things in good soil. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
Oh, it
but
does.
When it comes to the when it comes to the renewing of the mind, I think that's really, really huge. And if you find your mental state like in a state that you're not 100% about, or 100% like you feel 100% like confident about your mental state, I think it's good to look at those. What am I sowing during the week? Like, what am I sowing into my heart, my mind? And that's huge with the renewing of the mind. Of course, the Bible talks about renewing your mind by washing it with the word and the spoken word, and the spoken word of God. And there's power in that, and sitting under the teaching of the word weekly. And but there's so much garbage that's dumped to me from that. And so that I have to you got to take note of that and be smart and play play your week smart when it comes to what's getting planted here, I think, and in my heart. Yeah. And that's huge. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you just talked about rap music, and that makes me curious. What does a worship guy listen to? Like, my first thought is like, if I owned a pizza restaurant and I'm going out for dinner, I'm probably not going to have pizza. I'm going to want to kind of cleanse the palate with something else. And so your whole gig is wrapped up in worship music in some way. So when you're not listening to worship stuff, what's on Chase's playlist?
If I'm being honest, the Christian album I'm listening to is the latest Leeland record, City of God. Mm-hmm. And there's a song in there called City of God. It's unbelievable. That's like if I'm listening to Christian music, if it's not that, I'm not really listening to it right now. Part of it is exactly what you're saying. I talked a little bit earlier on this podcast about having your own unique voice.
Yes.
And having your uniqueness. And I protect that in myself as a writer.
Oh, that's
and
good.
As a voice.
Yes.
And that I can't be listening to worship music all the time because I just don't want to hear that melody and try, you know what I mean? And like that melody gets
absolutely.
I'm trying to, sing like Brandon or Phil or Lee or like any of that. Like I have to be myself to the maximum. And so that I do protect it in that way. Anyways, if you look at the data, worship music isn't necessarily growing. There are two things that are growing in sales right now are Christian hip hop.
Yes,
Spanish.
I've heard that. Yeah. And
so I don't think we've seen the greats in necessarily either of those things. Where it's like, okay, you said we're the greatest rappers alive. People have a top 4 of, and if you're a rap connoisseur at all, you have a top 4 or top 5 of the greatest rappers to ever live. Who are some of the greatest worship leaders? You got a top 4 or top 5. Who are the greatest Christian rappers of all time? It's not there yet.
No.
It's like we haven't seen the greats yet. So that excites me as a genre. I put out my first solo record last year. I had a couple rappers on it that I really believe in. One was named Jay Monty, who I believe in a ton. Another one's named Tori Deshawn that is just wild. His music is crazy. And so I believe in both those guys a ton. I listen to them. If you want just good Christian, you could play. It's on the lobby of our church. You know what I mean? It's like that kind of, but it's not. It's not serene. It's honest and it's true and it's real music. And so I respect both those guys a lot in the hip hop field for sure.
Well, and I'm glad you touched on that because it's funny having worked in churches and in ministry for so long, and because you're a part of, even if just at times being in the building and the iPod or whatever the source is playing stuff. And I've done a fair amount of running Pro Presenter at big conferences for a lot of the guys that you've named. And I just, honestly, if I never hear This Is Amazing Grace again in my life, I would be okay. And I know that that's bread and butter for Phil Wickham, but...
And an incredible song.
Yes.
An absolutely incredible song. But I can relate. I get it. I get what you're saying.
But do we, the church, do we latch on when it's a song? I mean, honestly, Oceans is probably right up there too, that I've heard it and heard it and heard it. I can run lyrics without even looking at the screen. I've done that kind of stuff so much. I feel like there's always an odd stress between, well, you want people to engage, so you're going to do stuff. Your morning set list is going to have stuff that, I don't even need to look at the screen for that. I'm just going to sing and worship God. But you also want to be able to introduce, hey, here's a great new song we're going to teach you this morning, to where that becomes part of the norm. I don't know if I'm being so specific with this question, just as much as I feel like at times we can get a bit stuck on what we do know, and it's always like, well, I don't even have a room right now for that new song. Can't you just do Oceans again? Because I love to just single tear.
Yeah.
Because God's calling me out to the deepest waters.
Yeah, of course. That's hilarious. I think we're blessed enough at Grace City. Part of it, because we started it, is that we get to do what we want when it comes to worship. You started the church, you kind of like, well, we started this 7 years ago. People keep coming, so we're going to keep kind of playing the music. So that's been helpful for us, is that we always keep it recent, man. We always keep it in, the last, 6 to 9 months of releases, and we're always in our own. And I think it's. A lot of Sundays, the whole set's going to be Grace City music, and in-house stuff. We're blessed enough to do that. And some people might be like, well, can't you just play what's on the radio? You know what I mean? But this last Sunday was a lot of Grace City music plus Holy Forever. Like that song, which is somewhat of a newer song. It sounds like an old song from Tomlin and Jen Johnson, guys. And it's unbelievable. It's like, our church just lights up when we sing that song. And so we've been blessed enough to do that. But I know that not everyone's like blessed. And like, if we took over a church, it'd be a different story of like, there's people that like, Oceans came out 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that. I remember when it came out, it was sick. And that was 10 years ago. And so I would encourage churches to just go current. Look at the last 6 to 9 months and go, what's God doing here in releases, and what's God doing with these songs? That's what I would encourage that. And I know that's, maybe you got to do one oldie for whoever in the church, and maybe from 15 years ago, whatever.
Right.
We just did Better Is One Day, like that back. We've been doing that. It's like fun. But that's an exception, not the rule. Like we love to just go, what's current and what's new and what's God doing. And so luckily we're blessed enough not necessarily get stuck in that too much.
Right. Okay. I have to ask you about that new, would you call it a medley? Your song mashed with Better Is One Day.
Yeah.
I love stuff like that I loved it, first of all, because it surprised me, because I was just so into your song all by itself. And you have that moment where you lay out and just let people worship, and it so seamlessly rolls right into Better Is One Day. And I love that you can even sense that the energy in the room changed to that. Oh, I know that song.
'Cause better is one day in your courts. Better is one day in your house. Better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. Yeah. And better is one day. Come on. And better is one day in your house. Better is one day in your courts than thousands. Better is one day.
Is that from like late 90s? I want to say.
Yeah, that's Redmond.
Yeah, that's back in the early Passion days, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that's one of the first songs I learned on guitar. Like even like just like playing guitar, talking about those youth group days. You know what I mean? It's like a 4-chord song.
Yeah,
and our pastor, even going back to SEU, like we're doing ministry times on campus and stuff. He's kind of like always like end of service, like better is one day. You know, like he's like gonna come back and go like, let's do Better Is One Day, and go like, and it's like we gotta make sure we're in the right time signature.
Yes,
like even like wherever you are and Better Is One Day, they're not in the same time signature. And so like, but we were like, but the theme was so on theme. It was something like, man, I want to be wherever God is, and Better Is One Day. And so like, somehow we made it work that night. But yeah, it's just a classic. Our pastors always loved it, and
love that.
It worked. It made him happy, and he was like, that's got to be the first song we put out. Like Pastor Andrew was like, we got to put that song out. Like he loves that song, and he was like, but he was right. He was like, I think it has a broad appeal to people too. I think that song means something.
You draw in the OGs at that point that have been around and have the gray hair to show it, but also just can hearken back to that and it's like a new buy-in to something that you know so well.
My wife is a real estate broker, and she has like a real estate office, and we kind of took it over one day for like writing with the church.
Nice.
Because there's a lot of offices there. So we just put writers in all the rooms and wrote it with Johnny and a guy named Jake. And we were like, this would be so sick to go into Better Is One Day after this, because it's just the heart of the song is the same.
Yes.
And they were like, when we do it, let's do that. So I think the first time we ever did it live, because we've been doing that song in church for like a year, maybe a year ago when we did it, of being like, oh, we went into Better Is One Day the first time, because I think it just helps frame up wherever you are in the heart behind that song in a powerful way, I think.
Oh yeah. Well, and when you can bring a scripture like that to life, that, I don't know, I've always used the word sticky. It's like you read a lot of scripture, you remember some of it, but then you throw it into song and the chorus can just loop in your head. You realize you're singing scripture, right? That is almost verbatim, at least in some version. And what better thing to have an earworm about that is looping through your head on any given day. Chase, this has been so good, and I feel like I could talk your ear off for another hour, but I want to be very, very conscious of your time. I always like to leave room at the end to say, is there anything that you thought we were going to talk about but didn't touch on, or for that matter, anything else that's just come to mind while we've been talking? I love to have a little margin for you just to talk about that.
No, absolutely. We're putting out our first live record in 2 years at Grace City. It's coming out September 15th. It's called Send the Rain. And it's all about asking God to send, the fire on our sacrifice and the rain to our land. And it's the last live record we made was in 2020 and no one was there.
Yeah.
Because it was like, people were scared to sing together. And so to have the room packed again at church and to make a live record, we're really, really excited about it. And so we'd just be honored if anyone would want to check it out. It would mean a lot to us for sure.
To worship means to show reverence and adoration to God. It's to stop and recognize that He is so much bigger than we will ever be able to understand. Even when it seems like our schedule can't possibly handle one more thing, taking time to breathe and to say, God, apart from you, I can do nothing. You are my source. You are my comforter. You are in control of everything, and I worship you. A few minutes alone in God's presence will transform your day. Making intentional time to seek God, not for things, but just for His presence, can change your perspective and calm your troubled mind. Psalm 146:2 says, I will praise the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praises to my God with my dying breath. I believe that to worship God is to recalibrate ourselves, a full-on reminder that He is the Creator, and that as I surrender all of my thinking to Him, He will restore my soul. Be sure to check out the show notes if you'd like to hear more of Chase's music. Crank it up in the car while you're driving to work this week. You might be surprised at how that will change your perspective on the day. There you will also find links to the Nook Facebook page, my social media feeds, and email address. Drop me a line anytime. I'd especially love to hear what you're getting from this series. What is God showing you? Make sure that you are subscribed or following the Nook on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss any of these great discussions and stories. And I will catch you here next time in the Nook.
The Nook Podcast is a production of Sozo Digital Media.